Hi, today we are here in a cab actually with an international interview with Dr. David Noonan. He is a worldwide renowned linguistic, lecturer, author, researcher, past TESOL president, and also professor at Anaheim University, California, and Hong Kong University, where he lives now. He also received numerous awards throughout his career for his contribution to the field of English language teaching. Wow, Professor! All of these are guided by passion, or there's something more?
Oh, passion, of course. People say to me sometimes, well, how come you can still have all that enthusiasm after 35 years of teaching? And it's because I love what I do, and it's always changing. There are always new things to discover. There are always new ways of looking at language and looking at the learning process. And also, when I go into the classroom as a teacher, I want to give my students the same care and concern that I want my children to get from their teachers. So that's the kind of perspective that I have.
So I agree. And according to your worldwide experience, is there something particular or in common that you have observed around the globe?
In terms of trends? Or what?
I think in terms of learning, teaching English at all in classroom.
One of the things that I've seen is that there's a big difference or a big disparity between levels of professionalism. You know, there are people who, and I talked in my speech just now about the fact that professionalism is characterized by teachers who want constantly to improve their skills and their knowledge through kind of lifelong professional development. They don't just go and do a university degree and then no longer try and engage in an ongoing professional development. You know, they recognise that you can never become the perfect teacher. It's a constant process throughout life. That also you have high standards and you try and stick to them or try to achieve them. Maybe if they're very high, you won't achieve them, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. That you also advocate for the profession. That you one of the things that I hate is when somebody says, "Oh, I'm just a teacher." I hate that word "just." It's I think demeaning. And then fourthly, that you keep up with the research. You're aware of research. You're aware of new techniques and so on. And I see a big difference between teachers who adopt that kind of professionalism attitude and teachers, many of whom don't actually have training. They might simply be native speakers of the language who just do it because it's a convenient way of making money. It's a convenient job. And so I see that kind of thing. And I see in many cases the teachers often very want to incorporate new ideas. They want to help their learners to be able to communicate, but they're constrained by very traditional ministries of education, and in particular by very traditional assessment practices. That the curriculum might be couched in terms of communicative language teaching, but the assessment system is based on a much more traditional model of knowledge transference.
Absolutely. I read an interview with you at eltnews.com that you told about two projects that you were involved. One of these looked at the impact of the new technology on learning outcomes. Could you please talk a little bit about this project?
Right. Well, I've been involved with a group called Global English, and they teach English through the internet. They're based in San Francisco, and I've been I act as a kind of senior advisor to them, and what I've been studying is the pros and cons of learning English through the internet versus learning in face-to-face situations. And I think in general I would say that a blended solution where you have a mixture of both are best. But one of the things that I looked at was what is it that technology can do better than what face-to-face technology can do. And I think a lot of the kind of say grammar instruction, learning vocabulary, pronunciation, listening, and and reading, that these can be more effective when taught through the internet than when taught in face-to-face situations, because you can individualize the instruction. The learners can have lots and lots of practice. The learners don't, the computer doesn't go red in the face and shout at the student when he or she makes a mistake. But also the program, as soon as the student does an assignment or a piece of work or an exercise or activity and pushes send, he or she can get instant feedback on their performance. And again, we know from a lot of research that the closer that the feedback is to the performance itself, the more effective the feedback will be.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so, do you classify as the technology that use internet? So
yes, yes.
All right.
Mm.
And an expert of teaching English to speakers of other languages, and also your knowledge about teaching English in Brazil. Do you think that Brazil is aligned with the currently teaching of English? In other words, we are finally working with communicative approach here.
Well, again, I think in most countries, including Brazil, there's a gap between the private education sector and the public education sector. And in a number of countries where I've done some studies, including classroom-based research, in the public schools, because of funding issues and lack of training and so on, very often the curriculum is couched in communicative terms, but when I go and observe what happens in the classroom, the teachers are still teaching in very, very traditional ways. And again, some traditional techniques, I'm not trying to suggest that all of the traditional techniques are no good. I think we should have a blend of traditional techniques and more contemporary techniques.
All right. And in your opinion, what does a teacher of English should do to be a contemporary teacher? What a person should do to be as happy as you are as an English teacher?
Well, I think love your students, really. Start with your students. As you probably know, back in the mid-'80s, I wrote a book called The Learner-Centered Curriculum, where the whole idea was to make the learning process a partnership between the teacher and the learners, and to take the views of the learners into consideration. Now, of course, the learners need training in order to do that. You can't simply go into a classroom with a group of learners who have had maybe fairly traditional instruction, because that will have conditioned them to a certain way of certain expectations about learning, and say, okay, now I want you to be a partner in the learning process. You have to do it gradually, and you have to train the learners. And that's why adding a learning process dimension to the curriculum, teaching them learning how to learn skills and learning how to learn goals, is important, because it will sensitize them to how they learn best, and also sensitize them to the fact that there are probably other ways of going about learning that they haven't been exposed to and may not be aware of.
All right, so I hope one day I can achieve it.
Well, again, it's an ideal. It's something that we strive for. And I've been trying these ideas for over 30 years, but it doesn't mean that they always work with all learners that I teach. In some cases it works, in some cases it doesn't. And that's, again, one of the reasons why teaching is such an exciting profession, and why it's as much an art as a science.
And it's why it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not the same every day.
No,
Right.
No, every day is different. Yeah.
All right. So thanks so much, Professor.
It's my pleasure, and I hope that the answers were useful to you and your colleagues and whoever else gets to see the video.
Of course. Thank you.
Okay.